tutorials and music, and I used to be a touring musician, but these days pretty much just stick to the studio. Today I'm going to work with one of my favorite tools, Sunvox, which is a free, free for Linux and Mac and PC software that you can make music with, and it's like integrated synth environment and digital audio workstation and sort of Amiga style tracker. Let me show you what I mean. It's also very CPU efficient. This is from their website. The developer really took great care to make sure it could work on a range of devices, so it's pretty rad. You can also get it for iOS and Android for like, I think it's $1.99 or something. So let me stop that random noodling, and I mean random because that is one of the things that I really like about Sunvox is you can do probability stuff. And what I've got running here is a couple of synthesizers that have notes programmed in, as well as control information that sort of randomly change some of the parameters. You can see some of the sorry, forgot to switch. Let me switch over camera so you can see what I'm doing. So over here we've got the basic. In the middle we've got the modules, and I've just got a couple set up. Down at the bottom we've got the timeline for sort of where you can drop your patterns and stuff. And then if I click on any given pattern, you can see up in the upper left hand corner there is a Amiga style tracker type pattern editor. And I think you can go up to 16 tracks. Maybe it's only 8, but here, let's see. Right now I've got 3. Oh, you can go quite a few tracks. That's exciting. I never even checked that out before. But so for right now, I'm just going to do 3. And a lot of the numbering stuff starts at 0, which is sort of a programmery habit. But like even the steps and stuff like that, instead of it being, if it's a 32-step pattern or a 32-line pattern, excuse me, you'll see that there are, it starts at 0 and counts up to 31. So that takes a little getting used to. But okay, so another cool effect that the developer put in recently, and I guess let me remember to switch the camera this time. If you check out their website, you can see some examples of it running on like PDAs and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But if we go to the user manual and go down to the new effects that have been added, let's see here. I think I should have just done. Okay, there we go. So we've got effect number. Yeah, there we go. Set playing speed. So one that I use a lot is note probability. Let me turn up the size of the font here. So note probability, which is effect number 20, just determines whether or not the note is going to be triggered, and it's a 0 to 8,000. Note probability with random velocity is also really useful, particularly for drums and stuff like that. And one I'm using today is write a random value on a specific controller number. So let me see. I'll show you that one in a little bit. And then one that's really weird and awesome is number 38, which is delete an event on track X with a probability of Y. So I loaded up the example pattern and then I kind of modified that. And so let me show you what that looks like. And switch back to our Sunvox view. So if we look at this patch here, I've got, usually I set the clock for 15 minutes or something. I'm going to go ahead and do that just now so that we can kind of keep this thing running on time. All right, so 15 minutes on the clock. Let me show you what I worked with here. There's this basically kind of a pretty typical synthy sound using the built-in analog generator. Let me reset things here. So it's just a little triangle. Give it a square so it has a little more kick. Yeah. Okay, so there's this pattern up here, and if you're familiar with Amiga trackers, this will all look pretty familiar. But if you're not, it's a pretty deep subject, but essentially just know that every line here has a note entered into it in the upper left-hand corner, and it represents some note on the keyboard here. And then there are also effects that can be written into different lines. So let's go ahead and run this one and see what happens. So as you can see, every time this pattern runs, it actually is deleting notes from itself, which is pretty wild. And I never, ever, ever would have thought to write that into software, and I'm so glad someone else has thought to do that, because it's it's pretty cool. There's this robotics group here in Austin. I can't remember what they're called, but they used to do this thing where Austin, Texas, where they would create this robot, but like it's basically just a machine that destroys itself. And I know other artists have done stuff like that as well. But yeah, it's basically like a giant mechanical robot that, as it runs, it literally pulls itself apart. And however you feel about conceptual art, I think that's still pretty cool. And this kind of has the same vibe to me. And I haven't quite figured out how you could build a set around it, a degenerative set around this, but that's a goal of mine, is to figure out how to do that. But I set it up running it on a couple other sound sources here as well. So here's one I've got that's it's like a random, it's like ringy tom, I think is this one. Yeah. And on this one, I have the module set up so that it takes any control information given to it. And even if you send it the same note every time, it's going to give you a random pitch. So let's see here. So that's silly. And then we've got this other one, which is a little more, it's a snare that has more of the actual snare strings on it, which is all just white noise. But so yeah, a bunch of random noise. You put them all together, and you have to make copies of them when you're working with these of this kind, because they will actually destroy themselves, which is an interesting thing, like to think about. Normally you save a project file and it's stable, so thinking about how you have to save it in its pre-written form before it destroys itself, it's kind of fun. I like it a lot. So yeah, there's a program, excuse me, a set of patterns that started out with notes that basically destroy themselves every time you run them, which is, yeah, like I said, I haven't quite figured out how to make that a particularly useful tool in composition or performance, but I really like that it's there, and I want to figure something out with it. But at the very least, I think it's a cool artistic statement. Even just writing that feature into the software is a cool statement. So, all right, let's move on to the next one, which is the randomization of control parameters. So let me switch so we can look at the website here, look at the manual. So if we go to the manual, we can see, where is it? 20. 3 is what I was using. Write a random value to the controller CC. Yeah. So, and you can, the controller numbers are similar to the module numbers. I'll show you here in just a second. So just as with the modules, they've got a little number above them, and you can address them by, when you write a new pattern, for example, you can write those notes, and under the column labeled MM, which is module, you can tell it which module you actually want to send that note information to. So we can change it to module, and module 2 is the echo unit, so nothing's going to happen if you send a note to that. But let's change it to 1, and we send it to the synth. And if we change it to 5, that'll go to our FM synth. So, which I've got set up over here. So that's how module numbers work. Controller numbers are similar, except that instead of which module they address which control you are trying to send information to. So let's take a look at our analog generator here. And note that over when you click on it on the left-hand side in the sort of details view, each meter, which is a controller, or a control value rather, has a number and then a period. And so if you change the value in the CC column, which is the controller value, you can address that specific control. So like we could say we want volume, or let's do something a little more fun. Since it's a square wave, let's go ahead and do duty cycle, which is 08. So we'll say control 08, and I want to do different values. So you put a different value here, and we'll do full value. I don't know. Okay. So let me change the length of that pattern real quick. We'll do 4. So I'm going to change this pattern just so it repeats. Number of lines should be 4. And we'll repeat that. And with that one, you can hear it on the last one. I forgot to put a value. So you can hear the duty cycle kind of snap to a closed position. Now let's see here. We'll do something a little more like 1, 5, 8, 9. So basically, another thing you can do is you can hold down Shift and change the value there. So if you hold down Shift while you're highlighting a specific line and change the drag on one of these meters, and when you let go of Shift or when you let go of the click, it will write that message into there. So what's kind of cool is you can use some probability to send a random value between two ranges. So like a minimum and a maximum. Send a random value within this minimum, within this higher than this minimum, lower than this maximum, to that control value. So on this one, I'll start with the simplest example. Basically, I'm sending to control number 2, which is the waveform. And let me open the filter up so we can hear that better. And I'm not sure why, but it doesn't actually reflect visually on these with this controller. It does on this one. You can see the actual meter moving around with each playthrough. And I'll try to figure out why that is, but at any rate, know that that's what's happening here, which is pretty cool. So one of my favorite sounds is playing a sound source and then modulating which waveform it is that it's actually being played. But it's actually not a super common feature on a lot of synthesizers. So anyways, so that's that set of notes being triggered, and every time it triggers, it's sending a random value into the waveform control. And then I did something similar except that in addition to waveform, you can see down here I've also got, I'm sending to controller 0B on this other track. And this is another cool thing you can do with Sunvox, which is I've only got notes written on one track, on track 1. But for track 2, I added just some more control information, but that without any note information. So the note information is actually blank, which is pretty dang cool, again. So, and then I took that even further and went a third row. So I'm controlling whether or not the note even sounds using the effect control number 20. So probability is pretty low that a note will sound. If it does, or when it does, it will also send different control signals to which waveform is being played and what the cutoff value is for the filter. So at this point, not super musical. Let me bump up the probability that a note will happen. That might help a little. But that's kind of cool, and it certainly could be a good bed for something without really having to work very hard, ultimately. I mean, if you don't consider putting numbers into a thing very hard. So yeah, so that's a good base for something, and then we could do something like, let's change this. We'll do a little attack here. Ooh. Sorry about that, it's a little hot. Yeah, so we could do a little something there. Let's do. And I think it's caps lock for note off. Hey, there it is. And there we go. Let's switch from that FM synth. I'm not loving that. So we'll do replace module. Got about 3 minutes on the clock here, so let's do Spectra voice. And it's nice. So yeah. Yeah, we'll do. Yeah. Bring the release back a little bit. And then, of course, the thing that typically makes music feel like music is some kind of drum. So let's do, or this kind of music, feel like there's some kind of, foundation to a thing. It's either a bass part or a drum part. So we'll throw a drum on there. It's pretty loud. So we'll do just a quick little kick snare. And boom. Beat. Boom, boom. Let's hear about that. Okay, and then we'll get a hi-hat. Let's see, where's that hat at? There we go. Ooh, that is loud. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah. yeah, I guess that's music. So my time is up. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Thanks for stopping by, and yeah, we'll see what else we can get into with this. But I do really want to kind of do some more deep dives on the various sort of more arcane effects processing you can do in randomization stuff with Sunvox. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Thanks a lot, and I'll see y'all next time.